as I said, the user interface in Macs is made up of many elements, and let's run through those elements. On the right hand side of the viewport, this is the viewport here, you can see the command panel, and this is quite a major feature in 3D Studio Max, and is actually quite dense in the amount of functionality that you'll find in this area. You'll find commands here to make objects, modify objects, create cameras, lights, and so forth. But before we get fully onto that, let's have a look at the viewport, which is probably the most basic area of 3D Studio Max. By using the middle mouse button on a 3-button mouse, if I hold that down, you can see I can pan around the viewport. In my case, I have a wheel mouse, so I can actually zoom in and out on the wheel on the viewport by using the wheel. So there we go. As you can see, it's a stepped zoom, so it actually goes in and out in discrete steps. If I hold down Control and Alt and use again the middle mouse button, you can see this time I can get a smooth zoom, which generally is the one that I would use most of the time, although for very fast zooms the wheel mouse is actually quite useful. Now at the moment you can see I've actually got one viewport, and it's very common to use 4 viewports. Let me show you that. And in a 4 viewport display, you would basically have a perspective view here. You would have 3 orthographic views. Sometimes one of the viewports might be configured to be an animation window, which you can basically work with your animation, or it could be set up to be a schematic of your system that you're working with at the current time. In this case, you can see that this window here is set up to be a front viewport. This window is a top viewport, and you can see that this window is a left viewport. So let me show you what that means. If I create a teapot in perspective, you can see that in the front viewport we've got a view from the front, in the top we've got a view from the top, and from the left we've got a view from the left. So you can see that with these viewports you get the traditional technical illustration views of objects in 3D space. As I said, you can use the same shortcuts that I was explaining about just now. You can use middle mouse button to pan in any viewport. I'm using the wheel to actually zoom in here. And in this case you can see that if I use Alt on the middle mouse button, I can actually rotate around the object in the perspective view. If I do the same thing in any of the orthographic views, that is front, top, left, right, basically any of the side-on views, top views, whatever, that will actually put the viewport into a user view, which is a non-perspective projection into space, which is actually very similar to isometric views that you may have actually worked on in conventional technical illustration. And at any time, if I don't want to use that view, I could change it to a perspective view by pressing P on the keyboard. I think U will put me back into user view. So you can see you can very quickly switch back and forth between these views. It's quite common when you're working though to actually use just one large viewport to work on, as I started off with, and by using keyboard shortcuts you can switch between the different views. For instance, L will do a left-hand view, T will do a top view, F will do a front view, P will do a perspective, C will do a camera, and so forth. So you can see by using these keyboard shortcuts you can very quickly switch between the different viewport types. If I put it back to 4 views again, the actual layout of the viewports isn't fixed. You can change the viewports by grabbing any of the lines and moving them around. There we go. So you can resize things that way. Or you could do all 4 at the same time. So there we go, which is quite a good way of working. And if you right click in the middle, you can actually reset that, put it back into its default position. Also, if you go down to here, there are various tools for navigating around the viewport, which are basically duplicates to the keyboard shortcuts and mouse shortcuts that I've just told you about. But on the bottom right there's a min-max toggle, which you've just seen. Actually min-max is the viewports. But if you right click on that, you can actually get to the viewport configuration dialog, which has various areas, but for now we're just going to look at layout. And you can see that in layout you have various presets that you can use. One of the presets would be just a full viewport, or for instance we could split the viewport down the middle, and you can see it's got a front viewport here, perspective viewport here. You could have top bottom, slightly offset. You could have one large view, 3 little views down the right, and if you right click on any one of these you can actually change what the preset would be for that. So in this case we'll say we'll change that to a front view, a top view and a left view, and we'll change this to a perspective view. We'll OK that, and there we have the layout that we've just chosen. Clicking in any viewport, you can see how you can pan around, and if pan around this one, use the Alt and middle mouse button to rotate around. And I'm actually going to zoom in on this object, and so there you can see you've got quite a bit of flexibility in the way you can lay out the viewports. Again, you can move the lines around to reorganize things a little bit more to your liking. So yeah, there's quite a bit of scope for customizing things to be, the way you would like them to be.